The winner is John Wayne in True Blood.
He wore dusty boots, rode into the sunset, and never once blinked in the face of danger. For millions of people around the world, John Wayne was the very definition of an American hero. But here is something that most fans never knew. Behind the cowboy hat and the steady gaze was a man quietly building one of the most impressive financial empires Hollywood had ever seen. And when he died, that empire did not collapse, it grew. The fortune he left behind was so staggering, so carefully constructed, that it turned his family into one of the wealthiest dynasties to come out of the golden age of cinema. Today, we pull back the curtain on the real story of John Wayne's hidden wealth, the heartbreaks that almost destroyed it, and how his name continues to generate millions of dollars long after his final scene. Before there was a fortune, there was a boy named Marion Robert Morrison. He was born on May 26, 1907, in Winterset, Iowa, a small, quiet town that had no idea it was raising one of the most bankable stars in movie history. His family was working class. His father, Clyde Morrison, struggled with lung problems and eventually moved the family out west to California, chasing drier air and better prospects. Marion grew up in Glendale, a modest city near Los Angeles, where he earned a nickname that would follow him the rest of his life. His dog was an Airedale Terrier named Duke. The neighborhood firemen who knew the boy started calling him Little Duke, and just like that, the name Marion quietly faded. Duke stuck. He was a strong kid with natural athletic ability. In high school he dominated on the football field, and that talent earned him a scholarship to the University of Southern California. For a while, the future looked like it belonged to sports. But a bodysurfing accident shattered his collarbone and ended his football career before it ever truly began. USC dropped his scholarship. Just like that, his plan collapsed. What happened next changed cinema history. A football coach introduced Duke to the director John Ford, who was using USC athletes as extras on his film sets. Duke started doing prop work and odd jobs at Fox Film Corporation. He hauled furniture, moved equipment, and watched. He watched everything. He watched how directors moved actors, how lighting changed a scene, how a single look could carry more weight than a paragraph of dialogue. And slowly, he began to believe he could do this. His first small role came in 1928, and for the next several years he worked in low-budget Western serials that most people have long forgotten. The pay was modest. The recognition was almost nothing. But he was learning the craft and building relationships that would eventually change everything. In 1930, director Raoul Walsh cast Duke in a widescreen epic called The Big Trail. It was an ambitious production. Duke was given the lead role and a new name, John Wayne. The studio felt Marion Morrison lacked the punch a Western hero needed. John Wayne was hard, simple, and strong, like the characters he would spend decades playing. The movie flopped. New widescreen technology meant only a handful of theaters could project it properly, and audiences simply did not show up in the numbers the studio had hoped for. John Wayne was suddenly a leading man with no momentum. He spent the next several years grinding through Republic Pictures serials and B-westerns, films made quickly, cheaply, and largely forgotten almost as soon as they were released. Most people would have quit. John Wayne did not. He used those years to sharpen his image. He developed that slow, deliberate walk. He found the voice, that unhurried, deep drawl that made every line feel like a verdict. He learned to be still on camera, because he had figured out something that many actors never do. The camera amplifies everything, and stillness reads as confidence. Then came 1939, and a film that rewrote his story entirely. John Ford, now one of Hollywood's most respected directors, cast Wayne in Stagecoach, a beautifully crafted western with a proper budget, a strong script, and major studio backing. The film was nominated for 7 Academy Awards. Audiences fell in love with Wayne's portrayal of the Ringo Kid, a man wrongly hunted, quietly dignified, and utterly fearless. Almost overnight, a decade of struggle became a stepping stone rather than a dead end. John Wayne was a star. In 1930, director Raoul Walsh cast Duke in a widescreen epic called The Big Trail. It was an ambitious production. Duke was given the lead role and a new name, John Wayne. The studio felt Marion Morrison lacked the punch a Western hero needed. John Wayne was hard, simple, and strong, like the characters he would spend decades playing. The movie flopped. New widescreen technology meant only a handful of theaters could project it properly, and audiences simply did not show up in the numbers the studio had hoped for. John Wayne was suddenly a leading man with no momentum. He spent the next several years grinding through Republic Pictures serials and B-westerns, films made quickly, cheaply, and largely forgotten almost as soon as they were released. Most people would have quit. John Wayne did not. He used those years to sharpen his image. He developed that slow, deliberate walk. He found the voice, that unhurried, deep drawl that made every line feel like a verdict. He learned to be still on camera, because he had figured out something that many actors never do. The camera amplifies everything, and stillness reads as confidence. Then came 1939, and a film that rewrote his story entirely. John Ford, now one of Hollywood's most respected directors, cast Wayne in Stagecoach, a beautifully crafted western with a proper budget, a strong script, and major studio backing. The film was nominated for 7 Academy Awards. Audiences fell in love with Wayne's portrayal of the Ringo Kid, a man wrongly hunted, quietly dignified, and utterly fearless. Almost overnight, a decade of struggle became a stepping stone rather than a dead end. John Wayne was a star. Great wealth and great mistakes often travel together, and John Wayne was no exception. In the 1950s, Wayne made the mistake that so many wealthy entertainers make. He handed control of his finances to someone else entirely. His business manager at the time led him into a series of investments that ranged from poorly conceived to outright fraudulent. Wayne lost an estimated $700,000 in a single disastrous deal, an enormous sum in that era. Additional losses tied to related ventures pushed his total exposure past $1.7 million. For a period, one of the biggest movie stars on the planet was genuinely close to broke. It did not stop there. He extended trust to someone within his own family to help manage his finances, and that too ended in poor decisions and mounting bills. The moment that crystallized just how bad things had gotten was surprisingly mundane: an unpaid bill from a department store, a few $1,000s that should have been routine, sitting in a pile of neglected financial obligations. That bill was the wake-up call. Wayne fired the people responsible, and then he did something rare for a man of his ego and stature. He sat down and learned. He began reading his own contracts. He asked questions. He demanded to understand every deal before signing. He stopped chasing glamorous investments and focused on things that generated real, predictable returns: better film deals, production income, real estate. Slowly and methodically, he rebuilt what he had lost, and then he kept building well past it. These painful lessons did not just make him more careful. They made him more strategic. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, Wayne's financial position was genuinely strong, not just famous person comfortable, but real, lasting, diversified wealth. The financial struggles were hard. The physical ones were harder. In 1964, John Wayne was diagnosed with lung cancer. He had been a cigarette smoker for most of his adult life, a habit shared by virtually everyone in Hollywood during that era. Surgeons removed an entire lung and portions of several ribs. The medical community quietly expected him to die. Wayne did not cooperate with that expectation. He came back to work, kept making films, and refused to be defined by the illness. What most fans did not know then, and what only became clear years later, was that a film he had made in 1956 may have contributed to the health problems that plagued him and many of his colleagues. The Conqueror was filmed near St. George, Utah, not far from where the U.S. government had been conducting above-ground nuclear weapons tests just a few years earlier. Radioactive fallout had settled into the soil and the air of that landscape, and the cast and crew worked there for weeks. Over the following decades, an unusual number of people connected to that production developed cancer. Wayne was among them, and many investigators and physicians who studied the clustering of illness believed the location played a significant role. Years after surviving his first cancer diagnosis, Wayne was struck again, this time with stomach cancer. He faced it with the same stubborn resilience he projected on screen, using his platform to speak openly about the importance of early detection and regular medical care. He wanted his experience to mean something useful for others. His final film, The Shootist, released in 1976, featured him as an aging gunfighter dying of cancer. It was a role that mirrored his own life so precisely that audiences felt the weight of it even without knowing the full truth. He was not just acting. He was saying goodbye. John Wayne died on June 11, 1979. He was 72 years old. When the details of John Wayne's estate became public, people were genuinely surprised, not just by the size of it, but by the precision with which he had structured it. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at approximately $7 million, worth well over $25 million in today's money. But beyond the raw numbers, what struck observers was how deliberately the will had been written. Every decision reflected his personality: loyal to those who had stood by him, generous to those who had served him well, and utterly unforgiving toward those who had let him down. His 7 children, from his first marriage to Josephine Saenz and his second to Esperanza Bauer, as well as children from his later relationship with Pilar Pallet, all received portions of the estate. He wanted them secured. He had worked too hard for that money to dissolve in the generation after him. Two of his longtime personal secretaries received significant cash gifts, tens of thousands of dollars each. These were women who had been with him through decades of demanding work, who had managed his schedule, protected his time, and kept his professional life running. He had not forgotten them. His third wife, Pilar, was not included in the will, but this was not an act of cruelty. The two had already reached a formal legal settlement years before his death that addressed their financial arrangements. That agreement governed their situation, and her name did not appear because it did not need to. The most striking provision was one that pointedly excluded his eldest daughter's husband from ever accessing any portion of her inheritance. Wayne had never forgotten the financial damage caused by that man's poor decisions years earlier. The will was written specifically so that even if his daughter passed away, her share would go to her children or to someone of her choosing, never to the man who had once mismanaged the family's money. It was a final act of protection from a man who had learned, through real pain, what it meant to be betrayed by someone you trusted. John Wayne did not just leave money. He left a system. His eldest son, Michael Wayne, had already been working in film production and understood the industry from the inside. He took an active role in managing the Wayne estate and ensuring that the family name was never attached to anything that would diminish it. Other children found their own paths, some in entertainment, some in business, some in quieter private lives, but nearly all of them remained connected to the legacy their father had built. The family established John Wayne Enterprises, the company that today controls everything related to his image, name, and likeness. This is not a small operation. The John Wayne brand is an intellectual property portfolio, carefully managed, strategically licensed, and fiercely protected. Nothing carrying his name reaches the market without passing through a filter designed to ensure it matches the values he stood for. Wayne Family Estates produces a line of wines that has built a genuine following. The grilling and outdoor cooking partnerships reflect the rugged, outdoor lifestyle associated with Wayne's image. Books, clothing, collectibles, and memorabilia continue to sell to fans across multiple generations. His classic films are available on every major streaming and digital platform, generating royalty income every time someone presses play. International licensing deals extend that income stream across dozens of countries. The John Wayne Cancer Foundation, established after his death to honor his wish to help others facing the disease that ultimately claimed him, has grown into a meaningful charitable organization. It funds cancer research, supports early detection programs, and raises awareness, doing the kind of lasting good that transforms a famous name into something that genuinely matters beyond entertainment. In 2026, John Wayne has been gone for nearly 5 decades. And yet his name still sells. His face still moves product. His films still find new audiences. Why? Part of the answer is simple nostalgia. People who grew up watching him want to stay connected to that feeling. But that alone does not explain why someone born in the 2000s might buy a John Wayne hat or stream True Grit on a Sunday afternoon with no prior connection to that era. The deeper answer is that Wayne represents something that never goes out of fashion. The idea of a person who stands for something, who does not waver, who meets difficulty without complaint. Whether you agree with his politics or not, whether you find his films dated in some ways or not, the archetype he embodied remains compelling. His family has been smart about this. They have not tried to make John Wayne into something he was not in order to appeal to new audiences. They have leaned into what he was, trusted that authenticity is its own form of marketing, and let the quality of the work speak for itself. That approach has kept the brand coherent and respectable at a time when many celebrity estates have stumbled by overextending or mismanaging their identity.